And we are live with our 146th episode of Absolute AppSec. I am Ken Johnson at CK Tricky on Twitter, joined by my lovely co-host Seth Law at Seth Law on Twitter. Seth, say hi.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode. I know we've been off for a couple of weeks with vacation. I've been under the weather. You can probably hear it in my voice a little bit, but we're excited to be back today.
It's not a COVID.
It's not. I have been tested. You can't catch it through your earphones or however you're listening, through your speakers, whatever. So now I'm completely distracted. As far as things that are going on, there's really not a lot on our fall schedule outside of the normal podcast. We do have James Kettle coming up next week, which should be a great opportunity for both of us to ask him a bunch of questions, see how he does research. There's all sorts of things that I have on my list. I know, Ken, you as well have questions for James on, how he got into the community, how he got started, all that kind of stuff, just because he is such a big name coming from Port Swigger right now. But outside of that, and Ken's going to post up a link here really quick. If you have questions for James, please get them over to us. You can use that Google form if you would like to, or you can DM us or jump into our Slack channel. However you want, we would take any extra questions that we can curate for James during this time. But do get them in maybe before the day of, just so we kind of have a plan for what we're going to ask him. Otherwise, I know there was a couple of things like here locally for me in the Mountain West. We've got St. Con's coming up. Forward CloudSec is going on. It started yesterday. It's going today. If you go to their website, you can actually stream the talks that are going right now. It's all online, but there is some in-person stuff that's going as well. But there's been some really interesting talks coming out of there. We can probably filter those out and talk about them at another time, Ken.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's everything that I've got on my radar right now. Do you have anything else that's popping up?
Not event-wise, kind of in a holding pattern for events to come back online. So obviously we have a ton of news to talk about today. Well, just things going on, but from a upcoming events perspective, it's obviously a little dry. So good times living in 2021.
Which is still kind of to be expected with how people are reacting right now. I do feel like this formula that the Forward CloudSec is following, where they have in person with online, kind of like what DEF CON did as well. I think we're going to start seeing more of that, where they give people a choice on how comfortable they are in attending or not. So hopefully we'll get back to it. That's all. But speaking of which, and I know this one probably wasn't top of your list, Ken, but we had questions on it yesterday. Ken and I, did a small OWASP meetup. But the new iteration of the OWASP Top 10 is almost finalized, right? It is public, and they have posted the draft out for peer review. Yes. I don't know. Ken, have you been through the list? I mean, I know you probably have because we know Brian, but what are your thoughts?
Oh my goodness. It's a little early for me to have thoughts, to be honest with you. I'm looking at this diagram here, just real quick. Let me see if I can share up my screen. Computer stuff is hard. Let's see. Windows. OWASP. So I was just looking at this diagram as you're kind of talking about it. Can you see that diagram?
Yep. We can.
It's a little weird, of course. But so I guess in 2017, we had injection at the first spot, and that's moving into the third spot. I don't know, like here, is this going to be just SQL injection, or is this going to be like, finally, Yes, I love it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cross-site scripting, now part of injection. That's wonderful. Yes, perfect. Because that's all it is. It's just content injection. So that's great.
Mhm.
I'm glad to see that. It's my first thought. And then broken authentication is moved down to identification and authentication failures. So let's scroll down there. And it's previously broken authentication, sliding down from the second position. It's not super, in depth, that description, because it just basically says, for those who are listening and can't see my screen, category, it doesn't really actually, so the actual paragraph says, was previously broken authentication is sliding down from the second position and now includes CWEs that are more related to identification failures. That is not really super in depth for me to understand what has changed there. But yeah, I am looking forward to parsing down a little bit more into that. There's this is what Brian had showed when he came on the podcast and was talking about the draft OS top 10. This chart here, how they all kind of just feed into each other, Venn diagram with overlap. So yeah, I don't know. My first impression is it's OWASP top 10, another change, probably more data driven. Brian Glass is really big on collecting massive amounts of data, but also making sure it's valuable data. It's formatted in such a way that we can make some sense of it and it's rational. So I have pretty good confidence in like the data analysis part of all of this. Let's see here. Wow, wait, that's interesting. So SSRF, that is an entire category now for aid.
Yep.
So that's actually one thing I guess that I would take away from this as being pretty significant is that server-side request forgery has its own category. This is an awareness doc, right, Seth?
Yeah. Well, and I know talking with Brian specifically, that was one of the industry survey vulnerabilities. So 9 and 10, those are not ones that are coming out of the data. Those are, hey, this is what the industry sees as critical or crucial right now, hence the reason that it's an awareness document. So we're going to include those, and then maybe eventually that's going to slide back up into injection, right? Because server-side request forgery is a form of injection, right, at some layer, and some. So but it is significant, right? Like I think we're seeing more and more of it. We'll see if it has the same effect as like XXE and some of those others that were in those past versions that really didn't materialize as much. But I don't know, right? Like I know everyone's going to have opinions here.
Yeah, I already have one. Thinking about, even though I love that SSRF has its own category, just because if this is an awareness doc, it does make you like it's more to the forefront, bringing SSRF more to the forefront from an awareness perspective by having its own category. However, I have to say, my first reaction is, why is it not part of injection? Since it technically is an injection. But I'm sure there's a reason. I'm sure I probably haven't read far enough down yet. And I'm sure it may, and honestly, it may just come down to like, hey, this is an awareness doc. We're trying to make people aware of SSRF. And so we're going to do it that way. But again, my first reactions, it is kind of an injection thing. So then I'm going to look at like software integrity or software and data integrity failures, because it looks like insecure deserialization has been kind of stripped and possibly put into that. So that's A8.
Yeah.
Is new category focusing on making assumptions related to software updates, critical data, and CI/CD pipelines without verifying integrity. Okay. So I guess that's probably, if you're running stuff in a CI/CD pipeline, bringing in libraries, not doing any verification of those libraries, maybe. Same with updates. Like if you're installing updates and not doing potentially any integrity checks on those updates, maybe that's what that relates to. So
Yeah,
again, this is kind of
I
a
think it's a
first
little
take.
bit more inclusive there, but yeah, that one will be. I don't know. There are some of these that'll be interesting to see how it falls out, right? Like how often they get used. I know from training off of the 2017 list that it was helpful at times, right? But there was stuff that we just kind of glossed over, mainly
Right.
because, yeah, mainly because we just never saw it, right? Or it was so specific to certain technologies or industries that maybe we just didn't get into it. So, and that's no knock on Brian, like and the OWASP Top 10 team, because I know they've had hours and hours of discussions about what's going into this, why are we doing this. It's an awareness document, how it should be used, right? Like what's the intention behind it. If you want a complete list of items to look through and vulnerabilities, go to ASVS, right? That's always been their go-to when you have complaints about your favorite vulnerability. But yeah, I mean, we'll just see. Basically, is what I'm trying to say. Like, I'm not disappointed with the list in and of itself. I think it's going to be fine, right? Like, yeah, it's hard to get excited about an awareness document, but
Well,
a
what
lot
I
of
think
people
is,
do, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
and I actually this is what I noticed is that there's this how to use the OS top 10 as a standard section. I'm kind of keying in on that because I have never seen that before. This is actually the first time I'm seeing that. So it's interesting to see this. This is very cool. Like basically they're saying, yes, it's an awareness document. However, it hasn't stopped people from using it as some sort of AppSec standard, right? Since 2003. So what I think is interesting is they actually give like a cheat. If you're only listening to this podcast, I do recommend you hop on the YouTube video to check this out so you can see it, or just visit the link that we had given previously. You can navigate there. But anyways, it just talks about like they've got this little table here, and it says sort of it gives on the left use cases. So you got awareness, training, design and architecture, coding standards, secure code review, peer review checklist, and then it gives you like should this be used right in that capacity. So for awareness it says yes, for training entry level, design and architecture occasionally. For a lot of these it's either occasionally or bare minimum, meaning it's not like supposed to be it's not really supposed to be used in this capacity. So like the bare minimum looks like tool support, pen testing, because you do see that frequently. If you're a consultant and you've sent out or been a part of like the SAL scope statement of work rather, being sent out to customers. This is what usually goes in there is like, we will make sure that we test against the OWASP top 10 and similar vulnerabilities, blah, 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 blah. But the reason that's usually thrown in there is that companies, oftentimes they want to have that summary statement that says you have OWASP top 10 included in your testing. And that can even be traced back to a lot of times when they get an audit, maybe it's a SOC auditor or something like that. They're like, well, did you get a third-party pen test? Okay, did it cover the OWASP top 10? So it's, like this stuff's all linked and yeah.
I completely blame PCI, right? PCI was the first one that just took the OWASP top 10 and put it in there. And like, it didn't even think about it being like, oh, it wasn't comprehensive. They just dropped it straight in. But anyway,
Yeah.
they've since changed. Yeah.
Yeah, things are getting better. People are getting smarter and wiser. But
Yep.
in any case, I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
I guess I can stop sharing now. I think go back to other stuff. We've got other stuff to talk about.
Yep.
Any final thoughts about that though? About the OS top 10?
No, just go check it in. I mean, be a part of the solution on that one, right? Like I know Brian and his team love, at least feedback on what the different topics are, what should be included in each one, right? How to kind of classify vulnerabilities. But I highly doubt that most people that are just drive-by commenting on it have put the same level of care and feeding and research into those topics as Brian and his team has. It wasn't a willy-nilly, hey, I have a favorite vulnerability. It was definitely a full-on process, and they've been working on it for I think since 2019, right? I know they have. So,
yeah. You know, and sometimes you see people, you know, kind of crap on the OWASP top 10 or, you know, I don't know, say it's irrelevant or things like that. Truth is, it's not irrelevant. It is an awareness document. It is useful to have the ability to categorize. Like, for instance, if you, oh, I see. Sorry, I see some sidebar stuff going on. I was like, what's going on? But if you take it as it's intended, as an awareness document, and you factor in how much care has been taken, and you know, it's the OWASP top 10 is always scrutinized. There's always a huge debate about it. There's always what, you know, people call drama. That's never going to go away. You have highly passionate and opinionated people from around the globe weighing in on something that's used around the globe. Again, as an awareness document. So if it's treated as such, there is value in that. I mean, so anyways, I guess what I'm saying is don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like, don't think that, you know, just because it was at one point used as a compliance standard that it's no longer like it. Yes, it was used in kind of what I would describe as it was used incorrectly. But I think if you use it in the right context, it's very helpful. So,
yep. Cool.
Anyways.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay.
So what do you want to talk about next, Ken?
Yeah, we could talk about, all right. I think the couple things that are interesting. So there are a couple things. There's one is the HA proxy request smuggling vulnerability found by JFrog with a CV attached to it. CV 2021 40346. We've also got the, oh my goodness, what am I trying to say? Can't talk today. The Apple sort of bug bounty kerfuffle complaint about the bounty payout, where the researcher thought they were going to get 100. They should get 100K for their vulnerability, and they got something like 5K. And like I said, a little bit of drama there. So it's really you have some good ones too. I don't know if you want to talk about the iMessage zero click exploit, which I think is a good. I do think maybe we start with that, and then we can lead into the, like, it leads us kind of into the whole Apple article I was just talking about.
Okay. Yeah. Hold on here. We'll post this up here. Anybody who's been following Apple stuff in the last day has seen all of the alerts on, oh crap, go update your phone right now, right? Or your watch or whatever, right? Like if you're running iOS. And so basically what has happened is the NSO Pegasus team was analyzing a Saudi activist phone and discovered a 0-day, 0-click exploit. So basically against Apple's image rendering library, there's a problem when when iMessage accepts an image, you can you can create a malformed image that will then exploit the device. Great, right? My issue here is okay, the fact that this group, whoever was using this exploit, based on what NSO is saying, has been doing it since February of 2021, right? All right, we've discovered it. We know that people have 0 days, O days, whatever you want to call them, that they target specific individuals. Guess what? If you're a soccer mom living in Ohio, you're not going to be targeted by this sort of an O day. You're just not, right? And the fact that we discovered it outside of, again, DEF CON and Black Hat, the people that go there and are like, hey, I have to bring my burner phone. No one is wasting O days on individuals that are not high value and that have access to data that you're not a state actor, right?
Yeah, because if they go to, just to clarify that, if they go and exploit somebody's phone, that gets detected, you've burned your ODay on for no reason, just for fun, right?
Exactly.
These things cost millions of dollars to actually, like, for groups that purchase these are, we're talking multi-million-dollar cost points for remote backdoor style malware. You don't buy those and then use them arbitrarily, or create them and use them arbitrarily. You sell them for a lot of money. This is a big high dollar game that we're talking about here.
Yeah.
So anyway,
And
sorry, I didn't mean to
no, you're absolutely right. And that's the reason why you don't see that sort of stuff pop up on the DEF CON network. You don't see it pop up as just drive-by hacks that are going on, that someone is targeting, random people in, in the States or in other places, because they want to use that for as long as possible against targets that they value, right? It becomes a whole investment proposition. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't go and update your devices. You should have, automatic updates going on. Like, Apple has fixed this. The problem that I have with the language and the articles that are coming out around those updates is, again, Ken, this goes back to this whole fear that the industry pushes out, as far as, crap, you better go do this right now or you're going to get hacked. If anything, it's probably causing other like people that like script kiddies to actually go do research into what's going on, to try and create something so they can screw around with it quicker. But at the same time, it doesn't have the same level of urgency as some of the other things. You as a consumer, as an individual, as like even a security professional are probably more likely to get, to have a compromised account through breach data and through an insecure password than you are being targeted by someone using an ODay for iOS. I mean, unless I'm wrong, Ken, unless I'm wrong.
I don't think you're wrong.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't mean that because I said that somebody wouldn't target me because they're like, oh, he just really doesn't care. It's not that you shouldn't follow and make sure that you are up to date and all that kind of stuff. It's just that we have a tendency to focus so much on these sorts of ODays and these sorts of problems when we're not doing general security hygiene.
Yeah. And on that note, I'm trying to remember hold on. I use this app called iVerify, and I don't know what various people's opinions of it are. It's developed by, one of the security companies out there that we're familiar with, and I cannot, Trail of Bits. Yeah, Trail of Bits, where Stefan worked. But anyways, I like the app a lot, and it gives me like notifications about things that maybe, like, if I've configured, stupid things, like allowing certain things to be accessible from the lock screen. Gives you, if there's a new update out, they'll immediately notify you, push a notification to your phone, like, hey, just like, you need to update for this reason. And there's just like a lot of guides in it and a lot of different configurations you can turn or you can change to secure. So iVerify, I don't know about you, Seth, but I have that. I paid for it. I like it. Yeah. And no, I mean, we're not sponsored. We don't have any sponsors. So it's just saying that because I like the thing, and I don't have any affiliation with Trail of Bits or anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you go to iVerify.io, you can check it out. I mean, it's just a matter of, again, of using security hygiene, right? Like of doing the little things that I feel like that's where we fall down. That's where we as developers fall down all the time, right? We take shortcuts. We're like, oh, well, I'm not going to worry about, that password or that whatever, because it's just too hard. And that ends up being the weak link in the chain. If someone is targeting you with the amount of resources and money that these large organizations have to develop something like this forced entry app, you're probably never going to know. I'm going to be honest, right? Like without some sort of intervention from other agencies and governmental organizations. So it's just like, do what you should be doing and then move on, is realistically my take on the whole thing. Yeah, I just am like I'm just frustrated because I see this all over the place, right? It's popping up in all of the news feeds and all these channels, and I'm just like, man, like, wouldn't we be better off telling people to go like rotate their online banking credentials for the first time in 10 years? Right, like what's going to have a more material effect on security, right?
Yeah.
So anyway,
what's the practical? Well, then this leads directly into our next article, which is let me put this in the absolute AppSec Slack. Yeah, and as a reminder, while I'm bringing this up, we do have a Slack channel. So if you're listening, I would highly recommend checking out the Slack channel to communicate. I know lately we've been a little infrequent with communications, but that's just because of like I have stuff going on, Steph, and for me, when I say stuff going on, it's like big events in my life, personal life, good stuff. But and then for Seth, he's he's been sick for a couple weeks now. So
yeah.
But anyways, check us out on Slack. Go in there, communicate with others. You can see some links that we've posted. Okay, so going back in here, and also you can DM us if you ever have questions. But anyways, so this is basically an ethical hacker that was not exactly happy with the outcome of their bug bounty submission. This happens all the time. As I had mentioned earlier, this researcher submitted to the Apple program, felt that the exploit that they had was worth about 100K. And in fact, they got paid 5K. The Apple's head of security, Ivan Kristek, I want to say, maybe I'm saying that wrong. Probably I'm saying that wrong. Had acknowledged that, there's some like things that they could improve on within their program, but their program, pays millions of dollars. Already this year has paid a couple $1 million in bounties. So, it's having, I got to say this, having worked on a bug bounty for 4 years, it is there. You always have to take what people say with a grain of salt. You always do, because, there's the side of the researcher, the side of the company, and everywhere in between. And, doesn't just because one side has, both sides could be saying their piece absolutely correctly and, being very legitimate, and there still might be some, but like, there's still some friction there. It's the nature of a bug bounty. You may not like your payout. You may not like the response times. You may not like disclosure. The company itself may not have the best way of scoring things, so it might be a little too subjective and leave a little too much room for interpretation, and that can lead to some of those feelings. But anyways, so basically, they talked about a couple points that really tie in well with what you're just talking about. So. Sorry, let me pull up the actual. I'm actually trying to find the. By the way, this vulnerability just allowed you to install malicious software on a Mac computer and circumvent Apple's protections for that. So that was what they felt like was 100K. But what I'm trying to get down to here is okay. So they kind of talk about Zerodium. They talk about Zerodium, but really it could be any number of companies that buy these types of vulnerabilities. And so what they basically say, if I'm correctly summarizing, is that researchers come to these programs because of, yes, they get paid, but they could get paid double. So for instance, $1 million exploit sold to Apple, which is basically any remote code execution, especially with phones, that gets you into a phone without like I said, any user interaction. That's $1 million bug bounty and under Apple's eyes. But again, Zerodium will pay about 2 million, right? And there's other places that'll pay more. And that goes back to sort of what Seth was saying.
Yeah. Speaking of which, these 0 days. Yeah. Why would you burn $1 million to hack someone during DEF CON? Right? Like, or 2 million, right? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Right. Yeah. And like this researcher basically says that, the reason that people don't go to the black market first and they try to go through the bug bounty programs is because of like a sense of ethics. trying to do some goodwill. That may be true. I also think there's the legal aspect of like, if you get in serious trouble, is it worth it? So I think that both things can also be true. But it brings up just it highlights, I guess, to me, the fact that people are paying top dollar for exploits, that your bug bounty programs should make researchers feel valued so that they don't go elsewhere. I think that's absolutely true. Do I think this particular research, I don't know enough about this exploit. There's no details here that I can really find and pull up, but excuse me, that's not true. I take that back. There is actually this article here. It gives, actually, no, that doesn't. Yeah. Not a ton of, it basically bypasses gatekeeper is what it says. There's not a ton of technical details. I'll put this article. It's linked from that original article. So it's hard for me to comment on the actual vulnerability itself, but I just think it does highlight kind of what you're talking about, is that there's a real market there for ODAs on the Apple platform. Having said all of this, though, man, like, if you're Apple, it has got to be hard to get it right, because you do have a ton of submissions, a ton of product lines. There's a bit of distrust of course, there's a bit of distrust for any big tech company right now. And even not just right now, like there always has been, right? So you're a target. People might naturally distrust you. It might be really hard to run a bug bounty program, is my point. But yeah, you don't want ODAs being dropped outside your bug bounty program.
Yeah, and actually, this is interesting, Ken, because Jason Haddix has been commenting on the YouTube chat, and I know he has opinions. So, I'm going to see if we can pull him in really quick, because it'd be interesting to get his take. For those of you that don't know Jason, he actually he worked at BugCrowd for years and years, was one of their top bug bounty guys, helped actually build that company out, and has a lot of experience running kind of both sides of bug bounties. So maybe we'll pull him in here if we can get him a link somehow. I was going to DM him something.
Yeah, I'm going to give him the Slack link first before you give him the StreamYard one.
Yeah, I wasn't going to drop the StreamYard one in there.
Yeah, just drop it into public YouTube chat. It'll be fine.
That's fine. It's fine,
Yeah. Do you need me to give him the link?
Let's see. I was going to see if I could find Jay Haddix. Actually, I think I can do this. I can drop it to him through. If he wants to join.
Yeah, for sure. Looks like he might have just joined Slack.
Oh, he did.
So stand by, y'all, because this could be very interesting.
I mean, my thoughts on, I don't know, right? Like, because I help a couple small companies that run their bug bounty programs, right? And as an outsider, both to the company and to the researcher, I feel like most of my time is spent jockeying or lobbying between, both for the company and for the researcher, right? Whereas and so I kind of have this split personality when it comes to bug bounty submissions, just because it is such a, I don't know, like it's a fine line to walk, because there is, there's the side of the researcher, the amount of time that they've put into it, the things that they found, what they've been able to do with the bug. And then there's also the company side, where it's like, hey, guess what? The only thing you accessed was, QA or test data. It's not a production problem. And so you end up, walking this line. But we do have Jason Haddix joining us.
Hey, guys.
Hey, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining. That's awesome.
Good to see you guys too. Yeah. I saw you guys on Twitter, and I was like, "Oh, this is a juicy topic." So yeah,
yeah,
that's awesome. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So, like, as we're jumping into it, right? Like, Ken was going through Apple's huge program and how much money they pay out, and then like that. Kind of the dichotomy of the, hey, the researcher thinks it was worth $100,000. Apple only paid him $5,000. What's going on there? I like, what are your thoughts on that? And then we can dive into other topics from there.
Yeah, so there's a lot of variables, right, to these stories. One is the one that came out yesterday, and like the article that talked about the inconsistency, and there's also the one I'm thinking of is the group of researchers, NahamSec, and kind of all of his buddies got together and hacked them for about an aggregate of 600K, I think, months ago. This was like maybe 6 months ago, and they found some stuff too. And what's really hard is that when you set a bug bounty scope, you have to set these kind of arbitrary like top end limits to start with, right? So on the business side, you don't just blow through your budget, right? Like it sucks in the real world, but there is actually a budget for the security organization, which usually runs the bug bounty. And only some places are getting to the point right now where bug bounty is actually like an executive conversation. It's a risk management conversation where they can say, yeah, you have no top end. We're trying to reduce the risk via this means. And we're willing to pay, we're willing to publicize that we have no cap on, this type of thing. But, Apple does have some stated, iOS based bug bounty payout guidelines. And they are much higher than things like bypassing, their in-app like inspection. They're much higher than breaking into their infrastructure via web apps, right? Which is what the 500K crew did. I mean, that's what I'm going to call them collectively.
Yeah.
And so like, they got to kind of live in this world where they could decide at any given point because they hadn't defined, right? They basically said the program's open to anything you find, but we have this internal council that's going to decide how much each one is worth. And I'm guessing that internal council internally to Apple is actually an amalgamation of like 6 security groups across the organization, right? It's like vulnerability management, it's like the red team, it's the actual group that runs bug bounty. And I'm sure, there is like a level of which they all report to, but I'm sure it's a shared responsibility. And so sometimes you can get this call right, and sometimes you can get this call wrong. For this specific vulnerability, though, the one recently in the last couple of days, the bypassing of the security stuff, I don't know if that was like $1 million bug. I think it's bad. If I was on that council, I would argue for something like 10, 15K just off the top of my head. It's pretty bad, but it's not like people got in from the outside. And then I would have argued for more for the 500K crew, honestly, irregardlessly if they're my friends, or irregardless is not a word, but irregardless if they're my friends and I know them in the bug bounty community. Those guys used SSRF to get from the public internet to internal Apple systems with source code on them, and those guys should have been paid the $1 million bounty. So those are some of my opinions. Yeah.
No, and you're absolutely right. Like so with GitHub, we do have a like top end amount, but we do leave room for adding bonuses. So even if you like top end, I forget what ours is. It might be like 30K or something like that. I honestly don't remember, but you can always like, and we've actually, I think it was yesterday or Friday, we had a researcher who found another cool vulnerability. And, just because this researcher's been submitting frequently, and they've been very impactful bugs, we did a bonus amount, proposed some bonus amount. So I think using that is a good tool But I mean, from a budget perspective, I know we have allotted amounts, and those get dumped into our HackerOne account, periodically. I don't know. One thing I don't know is what happens like if you blow through that budget. I assume it just gets refilled on our end, but I'm not sure how that works for other companies.
It just gets refilled.
Yeah. Finance does not like that model, right? They like everything to be finite yearly stuff. Yeah.
Well, because you go in with like based off of historic, this. I mean, historic trends. You go in based off of that and sort of also pad for more. But I have no idea like what happens when that amount is exceeded at other places. Again, I know how it goes for us.
Some of the horror stories are usually at the beginning, though, right? When you first open the bug bounty to public, right? It's like I mean, the curve is like hundreds of vulnerabilities. P2 and P1 in the bug cred rating are critical in the HackerOne rating in the first few weeks, and then it slowly starts to die down over time. So usually if you're listening and you're interested in the bug bounty topic, like allocate your highest amount of budget that you can get from your leadership at the beginning of the program when it's going to launch public, and then it will taper down. I promise it will taper down over time. You'll get spikes every once in a while, but yeah, it's hard to do as a leader, right? To budget the bug bounty, it really is. And then you have platform fees on top of it, and like bonuses if you want to be responsible. And yeah, it's a lot to think about. But I would say it's worth it. Every bug bounty, I continue to tell people that bug bounty is a worthwhile means of reducing risk. So,
Oh yeah.
you know.
I mean that's the constant discussion that I have. Well, even on the private bug bounty side, right? Like, if I can't convince a company to go public completely, I'm like, all right, we're going to add as many researchers as we can, month after month after month, because if we don't, it doesn't stay healthy, right?
Yeah, correct.
We don't have people looking at it, and you have a false sense of security as far as what is my real risk.
Yeah.
So yeah, sorry, Ken, I interrupted you.
No, I think I did. No, I think I interrupted you. But Jason had mentioned in the beginning, he had said, mentioned like executive leadership sort of paying attention to the bug bounty. For us, one thing that helps, and maybe other people can do this as well, is for each of our services or apps, whatever you want to call it, we have a service catalog. And when a submission comes in, it's attached to a specific service, as whatever like the vulnerability is with whatever impact it has. All of that gets tracked and reported against that service, right? So, and I mean, maybe I shouldn't say against, but it is true. It will negatively impact your service scorecard if you have like a big high impact vulnerability that's been sitting there for a while. And more importantly, that scorecard gets reported on to the executive leadership. So the leadership essentially has, okay, let's run through services that are failing on their scorecards and let's ask why. What do you need to get these things fixed? And then again, the conversation's like, where did it come from? Then you start talking about your bug bounty program. For us, that gave executive level leadership a lot of eyes into what is actually happening on the ground floor level. So,
what's interesting about that conversation is that's a pretty cool way to do it, but works really well kind of only with a place that sells security as a feature, right? Because the business is thinking about, this is part of our strat plan, and our go-to-market plan is like being the most secure, code repository in the world, right? But when you have a different type of business, which is not B2B, or hybrid B2C, right, becomes a harder conversation when people don't view security as a product feature. And then you're just asking development teams who are building internal software or something like that to take on a portion of the cost of the bug bounty, and it's a tricky conversation to have. It does boil down to like, a higher level ephemeral question of like, is security important to development even when it's not a feature, right? But at the end of the day, those are the conversations that you end up having, is like, why should they help you out with the strain of this on the budget? Why should it be visible and tracked across the business on every app, right? Why do you have an app inventory? What do you do? How do you build an app inventory, right? I don't know if you guys have done a segment yet on attack surface mapping or app inventory in the modern era yet, but that's a cool one that to look into that space. So
it's badly needed for sure, right?
Okay.
I mean, we've discussed app inventories and just how difficult it is to actually put something like that together, especially like when we had Jivan on talking about threat modeling. Like, if you're threat modeling an organization, you have to start with
you have to know what you have.
You have to know what you have, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And we've struggled with this in IT and security and, from an organization level for years and years. So yeah. I mean, using bug bounty as your app inventory is probably not the smartest way to go about it. Just,
it's interesting because I'm just rolling this out. So I'm not going to claim I'm an expert, but I am a recon head. So I know the methods as to which people find assets. The method as to how to track them internally, I've split it up into two categories: external, internal. Internal assets is going to be a large problem that's going to be dealt with usually by like a real system like CMDB or something like that, right? But there are more systems these days that are for your public internet space that live more in the realm of vulnerability management kind of platforms.
Yeah.
There's several of them, and we decided to use one of those platforms to track, and then several input sources to identify. And so one of the input sources is like a company that does asset identification on the web, which finds those which is supposed to automatically, like a scanner, find those edge cases, and gives us some vulnerability details on top of what we do with like a vulnerability scanner and our red team and the bounty finds. And then further down the line, we plan to run actually a recon bounty. Which once we've run the scanner for several months, we'll run like a specific recon head bounty, kind of like Security Trails did, where they were like, give us all the assets you can find on the internet to improve our service. We'll do the same thing. We'll pay a small amount for people who can find assets that weren't in our asset inventory or external asset inventory. And we feel like after a year, that plan will have given us like a 98, 99% view of everything that's out there. And then our job is to categorize every asset by risk, somehow take our rubric that we have internal, focus it to external, build the rubric of how we rate risk for each asset, apply an owner tag, which is the biggest part. Who owns these servers, what cloud range are there, what do they have deployed on them already as far as security controls, who are the points of contact, and then we'll have a really good asset inventory, at least externally, to measure against.
Yeah. I mean, that's the first. Well, it's cool to see that you're actually using that. I know I've had discussions, and I helped a couple of companies do something similar using your, the bug bounty methodology and the
nice, very cool.
to actually figure out what they had externally, right?
Yeah.
Because they just were so blind to it.
The bigger you get as an organization, the harder it is. It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, it's one thing to be like, oh, I know we have this IPA space internally, and I can just scan.
Yeah.
But it's another when it's like, oh, somebody has a charge card and can go and sign up for Amazon and set up a website and
new cloud range comes online, acquisition of a company. Like these are all common like kickoff points to the scope of your internet presence kind of getting crazy.
Yep.
I did want to ask you, we talked about, I don't remember, I think it was a few episodes back, but we talked about and then showed using this tool, AMAS. I don't know, I'm just calling it AMAS. Have you, or AMAS? Yeah. Have you used that? Do you have any opinions on that? I'm curious.
Oh, it's one of the best tools in the space for identification. As long as you power it with the correct API keys, AMAS is, there's two in the open source community, which are the best ones, at least in my opinion. It's AMAS and Subfinder. Subfinder maintained by the Nuclei team, who makes the Nuclei scanner, which is the best open source vulnerability CVE checker scanner out there right now. That is just bar none. That's hard to argue. And so they make Subfinder, and then AMAS is, an OWASP maintained project run by Jeff Foley, which is also the other one. So what I do in my personal recon for bug bounties is I just will run both. I will run both from a different VPS, cat the findings of them both, make sure they're supplied with the right API keys, and then unique the output. So
yep. That's what I was going to say, Ken. Yeah, if anybody hasn't read through the bug bounty hunters methodology, I think that's what you call it, Jason.
Yep.
You should, right? Like it's a great resource as far as getting started and actually having, again, a checklist of things that you do every single time to make sure that that you're covering your bases, right? Anyway, Jason, we don't want you to, we're so grateful that you were able to jump on and give your opinion today, right?
Like, no worries. Thanks for having me.
Don't want to take up too much of your time since we didn't schedule it out, but we're going to have to, we'll reach out to you another time if you have, you have some more, interest, and we can go through like the bug hunters methodology and maybe a couple other things, because it's been a while since we've had you on the show.
Yeah, it'd be awesome.
In a formal context. So cool. Yeah.
Cool, guys.
And
Have a good
so,
morning.
Yeah, you too.
Oh. Right,
no, I was
thanks,
just gonna say
Jason.
one of us has been terrible at scheduling.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Well, he's gone. But
Yeah.
if you're still watching, thank you, Jason. That was awesome. I really appreciate your time. Anytime we can pick your brain is really a good time for us and for the audience. So I've just been awful about scheduling. It's just been a whirlwind of things going on in life. So anyways, that aside, thanks, man. But yeah, do check out Jason's a bug hunter methodology document and resources. It's funny too, because when you read through the first two parts of that methodology, it's like mapping and authorization and session handling. And I'm like, what is the first two things that go on in our
code review course? Yeah.
We're part of the first 3 or 4 steps. But anyways, it's there. It's first 3 steps. So man, that's awesome. All right. So then I guess the last part, what time is it? Okay, we still have 8 minutes. So I did want to touch real quickly on the HA proxy. So this was I'm going to give 2 links here. I'm going to give the daily swig link, which kind of talks about just at a high level what was discovered in HA proxy in terms of request smuggling. Pretty valuable. But if you want the technical bits, and this is the part that I'm really interested in discussing, it is linked from that article. It is the actual JFrog write-up about this. So now, why is this one interesting? So the way that James Kettle's research presented request smuggling was to, and just real quick, I guess we'll just do a quick overview of what that means. Request smuggling is essentially, imagine you have a front-end server and a back-end server. And the front-end server is going to pass along some requests, right? Usually, like, let's say it's a load balancer or some sort of reverse proxy or whatever it is. It's going to take some requests. It's going to create a single channel to the backend, and it's going to send multiple requests that it's receiving off through that one channel. And so if you can trick essentially or cause a disruption between what the front end server sees as individual requests and what the back end server sees as individual requests, you can cause some confusion. That confusion may allow you to reach services that you would otherwise not be able to reach services you would otherwise not be able to reach. Maybe like from that front, proxy, it allows communication from the front proxy out to like other apps, for instance, right? Maybe it is getting different content returned. Maybe it's having an XSS payload returned to a different user who had also sent a request, but now their request is confused with your request. And so the response therefore is confused, and you get a response back, they get a response back that was intended for you. So that's the high level of request smuggling. And in the original write-up and research, the way it was performed was a difference between a content length and transfer encoding values. So what would happen is maybe the front end server would see the content length, say, okay, I'm going to bundle up this request into an array of bits, and I'm going to send this off to the back end server. But, then the back end server sees maybe like, this discrepancy. Maybe it's reading the transfer chunked encoding bit. Those are the typical ways that it basically, causing some confusion between what of this request is one request and what of this is multiple requests. That's basically what I'm saying. Now, what's interesting about this particular, and let me take that off the screen and maybe even just share my screen, because I think the visual could help quite a bit. So let me get this shared out and show people what's interesting about this version of the attack, because it does differ slightly. It's the same attack, but executed a little bit differently, which is pretty awesome. So, okay, should see what happens inside HA proxy. Let me expand this.
Yeah.
All right. So this is interesting right here. Imagine this attack. So the content length 0 AAA, all of that, right? The intent is that you're going to follow a schema of 8 bits. And so it should be under 256 characters, the content length itself, right? So going back to it, this content length header, you'll notice there's 2 content lengths. So if this content length, the top one that's got the 0 and a whole bunch of A's, if this was either, I don't know, if these were different values and this was actually a legitimate like content length colon some value, the first one, it would just either, I think it just, HA proxy would just ignore the second content length there, and it would just be fine. It would just go with the first. I think actually that I might be wrong. The whole request might actually be rejected, or it might just, I can't remember. It might just drop the second content length. But what this does is it takes that 256 limitation. It's an actual integer overflow. So this is actually equals 270 bytes. So now you have 14 remaining, and you see it goes on for a while. You actually have 14 remaining, God, I can't talk today. What am I trying to say?
14 remaining bytes or
Bytes,
characters? Yeah.
Bytes. Yes.
Yeah.
So that value gets stored as, that overflow gets stored as a character for the value when it's represented. So basically what I'm saying is HA proxy is going to see this content length header. It's going to see that there's like 14, like there's an overflow. So it's going to see like there's 14 characters left. Then it'll attach, as it parses, it'll attach those 14 characters left as an actual content length value, not the key of content length, but the actual value. Now this causes some confusion in the way that it gets parsed on the back end, because what's going to happen is this is going to, they show a conversion here. This is what it's going to look like. It's going to end up having that request have a content length of 0. So that remainder that we talked about, that overflow amount, turns this into a 0 value content length. So then this is interpreted as like, okay, there's nothing there. Oh, there's also another request here to the administrative dashboard. And perhaps maybe you couldn't get to the administrative dashboard unless you're originating that request from the proxy, right? That's kind of the thing that's going on here. So by creating an overflow situation in the content length, you actually cause HA proxy to have a parsing issue. And it talks about how it does this. It's like, you know, at phase 2, while iterating over the blocks array, it sees the content length, reads 14 characters, forgetting the name, and treats it as a legitimate content length header. So the actual name of the content length header being that overflow creates a value condition of 0. And then again, what would an application do if it saw a post request with a 0 content length? It'd say, well, there's nothing else there to do. There's no body. So what else is there to do? Oh, hey, by the way, there's another request here. And that's essentially what's happening. It's getting snuck in. And I just thought that was a really cool way of doing request smuggling. I just thought it was a little novel way of doing it. And I suspect we're going to see a bit more of this, Seth.
Yeah. And I mean, this all points to, protocol mismatch, the research that, James, the Portswigger guys have been doing into request smuggling. And, when we have different technologies that talk to each other, this is exactly the problem that we have. A mistake in one of those technology leads to vulnerabilities in others because you are assuming that first layer is protected, right? Like we have this idea of the hard outer shell. And if that hard outer shell fails, then all of a sudden we're not as protected, or we're allowing things to happen that probably shouldn't happen.
Yeah. One of the questions we got last night at the OWASP meetup was how do you make a case to management about performing assessments of internal only applications? And we went into a few of these things, but this is exactly what we're talking about. You have to assume that like your hard outer shell is, I mean, we don't design our networks anymore like that, where we're like, oh, as long as you have well, hopefully not. As long as you have a firewall and you do like software updates, and you should be good, right? Like you've closed off connections internally, so you should be good. And in reality, it's like people click on links, people do things, people make firewall changes. I don't know, things go wrong, and you can't rely on that hard outer shell. But this is one of those cases where it kind of highlights that. It's like, well, if you have whether it's DNS rebinding or if it's request smuggling, there's always or if it's just, you know, like I said, getting on someone's laptop, you've got the ability, once you're inside, to access these apps. And if you haven't secured them, who knows what's lurking, right? So that's for that
Yep.
question. I think that's one way to address it.
Yeah, yeah, and it's it is. I mean, it's interesting to see these novel bypasses come up, because it shows that we don't necessarily test those edge cases as thoroughly as we probably should. And number two, this is an area of research that is just expanding, and we're at the beginning of probably more and more of these coming out. To your point, that there's more eyes being focused on the technologies that are sitting externally and how to utilize those and break through them to get access to that soft inner shell. And I mean, between HA proxy, Nginx, the different redirect engines, everything that exists out there on that hard outer layer, it's easier to get through those custom setups and custom configurations than it is firewalls that have been in place and understanding of the networking layer that's been around for 20, 30 years, right? So yeah, cool. Well, good, Ken. We have been going for over an hour today. Thanks again to Jason Haddix for joining up last minute and giving his opinion on bug bounty stuff. I don't know. Is there anything else last minute that you want to talk about, Ken, before we close it up for today?
No, this has been a fun episode. And then, thank you, Jason. That's awesome. Pleasant surprise today. So, no, just remember, and I guess let me just forefront it again. This link right here, I put at it's the very first chat message. We will have James Kettle on next Tuesday. We're talking about request smuggling. That's James's research. James has done a ton of research. If you're watching this podcast, certainly you've heard his name. So, this is a good chance to pick James's brain. I know, we are very much looking forward to it. So anyways, you could send whatever questions you want. We created a forum. It's got a paragraph, so you can put multiple questions in there that you might want to ask James, and we'll do that. So,
yeah. All right. Good deal. Then please join the Slack channel. It's also in the show notes today. If you have other questions or you want to engage in the conversation further about the items that we talked about today, and join us next week as we talk with James.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining today. We'll talk to you all soon.
Bye.